February 7th, 1985, Guadalajara, Mexico. A man walks out of the U.S. consulate at lunchtime to meet his wife for a sandwich. He never makes it to the car. 5 men are waiting. They force him into a Volkswagen and drive away in broad daylight on a public street in the middle of a workday. His name is Enrique Camarena. Everyone who knows him calls him Kiki. He's a DEA agent, and for the past several months, he's been getting too close to something. 30 hours later, in a house less than 2 miles from where he was taken. That closeness is the reason he's still alive to be tortured. This is the story of the man Mexico convicted for what happened next. The case the United States is trying to convict him for all over again 40 years later. And the allegation that the agency meant to be America's first line of defense may have known exactly what was happening to him while it happened. To understand why Kiki Camarena was taken, you have to understand what he just cost a man named Rafael Caro Quintero. By the early 1980s, Caro Quintero was one of 3 men running what American investigators would later call the Guadalajara Cartel, alongside Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo and Ernesto Fonseca. Between them, they controlled most of the cocaine and marijuana moving north through Mexico into the United States. None of it worked without protection, and in Mexico in the early 1980s, protection had an actual badge attached to it. Mexico's Federal Intelligence Service, the Dirección Federal de Seguridad, the DFS, issued credentials to top traffickers in exchange for bribes. DEA agents in the field had a nickname for those cards: a license to traffic. One American investigator complained that every time they arrested someone, the man had a DFS badge in his pocket, plates that weren't even on any official payroll. From 1978 to 1982, the DFS was run by a man named Miguel Nazar Haro. Investigators would later allege that Nazar Haro personally provided operational protection to the Guadalajara cartel's founding leadership, Caro Quintero and Felix Gallardo included, in exchange for regular payoffs. By the time Camarena started working the case in the early 1980s, that protection wasn't a rumor traffickers whispered about to look important. It was the plumbing the entire cartel ran on. In November 1984, Camarena's undercover work led Mexican soldiers to a 1,000-hectare marijuana plantation in the state of Chihuahua. It was called Rancho Búfalo, and it belonged to Caro Quintero. Soldiers burned more than 10,000 tons of marijuana on the spot, a loss estimated at over $100 million. By some estimates, several times, that once you account for the operation's total capacity. It was the single largest blow the Guadalajara cartel had ever taken. And Caro Quintero knew exactly which American agent had found the ranch. Camarena was taken from a street outside the U.S. consulate on February 7th, 1985, and driven to a house at 881 Lope de Vega in Guadalajara, a house that belonged to Caro Quintero. He was tortured there for roughly 30 hours. A Mexican intelligence officer would later testify that the interrogation was designed to answer one question: how much did the DEA actually know, and who inside Mexico's own government had been talking? One of the men present, according to a Los Angeles jury years later, was a Mexican businessman named Rubén Zuno Arce, the brother-in-law of a former Mexican president. He wasn't cartel muscle. He was connected society, present at a torture session inside a drug lord's safe house. Camarena's body, along with that of his Mexican pilot, was found a month later, wrapped in plastic, dumped in a rural area of Michoacán. The killing of a DEA agent triggered the largest homicide investigation in the agency's history, Operation Leyenda. Washington shut down border crossings for days at a time, just to make Mexico feel the diplomatic cost. Caro Quintero ran. He got as far as Costa Rica before Mexican investigators tracked him to a mansion in Alajuela, and arrested him on April 4, 1985. Less than 2 months after the killing, he was extradited back to Mexico, tried and convicted for Camarena's kidnapping and murder. He was sentenced to decades in prison. Additional convictions on related charges would eventually stack his combined sentence into the hundreds of years. Ruben Zuno Arce, the well-connected businessman who'd been present at the torture, was extradited to the United States and convicted there in 1990 after 2 trials. The first overturned on appeal of racketeering, kidnapping conspiracy, and aiding the murder. He was sentenced to life. He died in a U.S. federal prison in 2012. In the wreckage of the scandal, Mexico dissolved the DFS entirely, folding its functions into a new intelligence service. The agency that had spent years handing traffickers a badge and calling it a license didn't survive the fallout from what that license had protected. One more arrest came out of the Camarena case, and it says as much about the institutions chasing justice as it does about the ones that failed to prevent the murder in the first place. A Guadalajara gynecologist named Humberto Alvarez Machain was accused of being present during Camarena's torture, allegedly injecting him with drugs to keep him conscious and alive so the interrogation could continue longer. Mexico wouldn't extradite him. So in April 1990, the DEA paid Mexican bounty hunters to abduct him directly from his medical office, fly him to a private airstrip, and hand him over to American agents in El Paso, Texas. No treaty authorized that. Alvarez Machain sued, arguing the United States had no right to kidnap a foreign citizen off foreign soil to prosecute him. The case reached the U.S. Supreme Court. In June 1992, the justices ruled 6-3 that it didn't matter how he got to American custody. The court still had jurisdiction to try him. He went to trial in Los Angeles. And after all of that, the abduction, the diplomatic fallout, a Supreme Court case that's still cited today whenever the U.S. snatches a suspect off foreign soil, a jury acquitted him. The evidence against him didn't hold up. Camarena's murder didn't just end a Mexican intelligence agency. It rewrote how far the United States was willing to say its own reach extended, whether or not the person on the other end of that reach was actually guilty of anything. Here's where the story stops being settled history. To understand why the next claim is even coherent, you need one piece of Washington context first. Through the early 1980s, Congress passed a series of laws known as the Boland Amendment, banning U.S. support for Contra rebels fighting Nicaragua's government. The Reagan administration kept funding them anyway, off the books, through a scheme that later blew up publicly as the Iran-Contra affair. Arms sold secretly to Iran, the profits diverted to the Contras. Part of Congress's original concern, on the record at the time, was that Contra funding was already flowing through cocaine trafficking networks. That much isn't an allegation. It's the reason the amendment existed. Starting in 2013, 3 men with direct ties to the Camarena case went on the record with a claim far more explosive than cartel on cop violence. Hector Bereles, the DEA agent who led Operation Leyenda. Phil Jordan, former director of the DEA's El Paso Intelligence Center. And Tosh Plumlee, a man who says he flew contract missions for the CIA. Their claim that Camarena hadn't stumbled onto a marijuana ranch that just happened to be enormous. He'd stumbled onto a joint operation, Mexican traffickers moving cocaine into the United States with the knowledge of American intelligence, to help fund weapons for Nicaraguan Contra rebels the Reagan administration was arming off the books. Bereles alleged that CIA personnel were present during Camarena's torture, and that 2 Mexican police informants who witnessed it independently identified a photograph of the same man, described as a Cuban CIA operative. If true, the claim reframes the entire case. Not simply a trafficker punishing an agent who cost him a harvest, but an intelligence failure Washington had every reason to want buried. The CIA's response on the record to Fox News in 2013. It's ridiculous to suggest that the CIA had anything to do with the murder of a U.S. federal agent. And it's worth being straight about the other side of this too. Insight Crime, an investigative outlet that has covered organized crime in the Americas for over a decade and doesn't have a side in this fight, reviewed the same documents these allegations lean on and reached a narrower conclusion: that a CIA Guadalajara cartel connection tied to Contra funding is real and documented, but that the specific leap to the CIA orchestrated Camarena's murder isn't supported by what's actually in the paper trail. 3 named men made a serious allegation. The agency they accused denied it flatly, and at least one outside investigator who dug into the same evidence isn't convinced the full conspiracy holds up. All 3 of those things are true at once, and the story doesn't get to pick just one. While that allegation sat mostly unresolved, Caro Quintero sat in a Mexican prison for nearly 3 decades. Then, on August 9, 2013, a local court in Guadalajara ordered him released, not because anyone found him innocent, but because of a jurisdictional technicality. His original trial had been conducted under federal statutes for what an appeals panel later ruled should have been prosecuted as a state-level crime. 28 years into a sentence that was supposed to run past 100, a paperwork argument put him back on the street. The United States was furious. The DEA reinstated a $5 million reward for his capture. Mexico's Supreme Court eventually agreed the release had been improper and moved to overturn it. By then, Caro Quintero was already gone. For nearly a decade, Rafael Caro Quintero operated as one of the most wanted fugitives on the planet while barely leaving his home state. Investigators allege he helped establish and back a newer trafficking organization in northern Mexico, the Cartel, from inside hiding. Mexican Marines finally recaptured him in July 2022 in the state of Sinaloa, not far from where he'd been born 70 years earlier. Journalists and DEA veterans had taken to calling him El Narco de Narcos, the trafficker's trafficker, a founding figure whose organization had effectively invented the modern Mexican cartel playbook and outlived nearly everyone who built it alongside him. In February 2025, Mexico expelled 29 imprisoned cartel figures to the United States in a single operation, the largest transfer of its kind in the history of U.S.-Mexico law enforcement cooperation. Caro Quintero was one of them. He appeared before a U.S. magistrate judge in the Eastern District of New York and pleaded not guilty to charges including leading a continuing criminal enterprise, drug trafficking, and orchestrating the kidnapping, torture, and murder of Enrique Camarena, the same killing a Mexican court had convicted him of 40 years earlier, now being prosecuted again under American law for the first time. The lead charge carried the possibility of the death penalty. Federal prosecutors waited for months. In 2025, the Attorney General's office confirmed it would not seek execution, the same decision made in the parallel U.S. case against Sinaloa cartel figure Ismael El Mayo Zambada, extradited around the same period. As of this video, Caro Quintero remains in U.S. federal custody awaiting trial, currently scheduled for March 2027. His attorneys are fighting the prosecution's request for an anonymous jury, arguing it undermines the presumption of innocence he is legally entitled to while that trial remains unheard. Everything about what happens next in this case is, as of today, still unwritten. Two things are true about this story, and they don't fully agree with each other. 1. A man was convicted of orchestrating the torture and murder of a U.S. federal agent using a house that belonged to him, with a well-connected witness present who was later convicted in an American courtroom. That part of the record isn't in serious dispute. 2. The agency positioned to answer for what it may have known about a Contra-era drug pipeline running through the same networks has never had to answer for it in a courtroom, under oath, at all. 3 men with direct knowledge of the case made that allegation on the record. The CIA denied it. No court has ever tested either claim. Camarena's murder ended one federal intelligence agency in Mexico outright. The DFS didn't survive the scandal. It's never come close to costing anyone anything on the other side of the border, if the allegation is even true. That's not a verdict. It's the gap this story leaves standing more than 40 years later. With a jury still not yet empaneled and a trial date still more than half a year away. In March 2027, a jury in Brooklyn will hear a case about a killing that already has one conviction attached to it. Decades old, an ocean of appeals away, and reopened as if none of it happened. Whatever that jury decides, it won't touch the other half of this story. The allegation that never made it to any courtroom at all, full source list and case documents in the description.